next witness is 458. The witness is a member of the Revolutionary Guards, special group called Imam Ali Battalion, and he will give evidence from Iran. The witness has asked not to be disturbed while he's making his statement, so please reserve your questions when he's finished. Thank you. I understand the witness is online. Is the witness available? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, can you please?
Yes, I can hear you.
Mr. Chairman, can you?
Thank you very much for agreeing to testify. Would you repeat after me, please? I solemnly declare that I will speak the truth.
Man.
I solemnly declare to speak the truth.
The whole truth and nothing but the truth.
The whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. If you'd wait there, there'll be questions from prosecuting counsel and then from the panel. Thank you.
یه شهروند عادی بودم که سرم به زندگی خودم.
I used to be an ordinary citizen. I was living my own life until I received an invitation from Basij in '98, and I went to the Basij militia. And I was told that since I am one of those individuals who are trusted in the area, I am invited to go and join the Basij militia. I respectfully told them that I could not do so. And this is out of my hands. This is not something that I can do. They threatened me verbally somehow then, and they said this would I would pay a heavy price if I wouldn't. And those who have decided not to cooperate, they did not have a good situation after. They did not see well after. I went back home after a few days. Something very terrible happened to me, which affected my life altogether. I was called again, and they talked to me. They told me, if you had accepted our suggestion on that day, such a thing would not happen to you. And I realized that there were some other individuals who had faced similar incidents, some legal problems. Some were sacked from their work. Some were threatened, and as their family would be put in danger. So they threatened people and they implemented the threats. The threats were not empty threats. That's when I joined the Imam Ali Battalion. Imam Ali Battalion is a battalion that belongs to the Basij militia. People are being trained there under the commander of the IRGC of the province. I used to receive calls every now and then to receive training. And since I was working, I was not receiving a salary from them. I should say that I was somehow hostage to the Basij militia. They had found some excuses to hold me and others as hostages. They called me there and they started talking to me. They said, in order for you to be saved from your problems, we can help you if you cooperate with us. I just realized that all the problems that I was facing in my life was because they were implementing their threats. They wanted to force me to cooperate. And there were some individuals who were very violent, brutal individuals, some people who were knife bearers, and some individuals were rapists. There was a taxi driver who had taken the girls and the wives of people and had raped them. So they were fraudulent individuals, rapists, and criminals. They were individuals who had gone to people's houses and had been rapists, stealing people's houses. So they were all these types of people among them. I was really surprised. What were they doing here then? I just realized that they had also been treated similarly, that if they wanted to be free, if they needed to cooperate with the Imam Ali battalion of the Basij militia, which was working under the IRGC. And there were some individuals, too, who belonged to poorer families. They were in a very dire situation. They didn't even have good clothes to wear. They didn't have shoes to wear. They were coming there with slippers. They were just being promised to get a sandwich or some warm clothes. Sometimes they were given a ticket to go to the swimming pool or to attend a football match, or sometimes they were promised to be given a sports clothes, and some of them were being given promises to be recruited or to be employed, so they could get a recommendation letter to be recruited at an office or somewhere. So some people were threatened, some people were encouraged, and so they had a stick and carrot policy. And whatever we said, we couldn't get it we couldn't get our voice anywhere. We could have just being put in prison, and we could not complain to anyone. They told us that they could beat us, kill us, and they would not be accountable. They contacted me at a time so many times. They asked me and the others to come for various types of trainings. At the beginning, a number of people like me who were, in fact, ordinary people working as shopkeepers and the like, we didn't really like to join them, but the criminals that had joined the militia forces, they even liked their job. They preferred to join them. But us, who were just breadwinners, we just wanted to do our own, to make efforts to carry on with our own lives. And we were just frightened that if we wouldn't listen to them, what would happen to us and our family. So they contacted us so many times, so we had to go there and receive training. And there were teams. One team was chanting slogans in front of us, and by using a type of pine fruit, we had to throw that to the other side. And we all should have learned how to dodge. And we burnt tires, or we gathered barrels in one place. So we were learning how to carry out some partisan wars on the street until Saturday, 16th of November came.
On 16th of November, they ordered me to go and report, and we went to the street, and we noticed that many young people, maybe primary school or high school. And when I say primary, I'm talking about under 11-year-old or high school, under 14-year-old school. They had brought us all together, and we went to the IRGC base, and we saw they'd also brought some of the thugs which we have in our town. They'd also gathered them. They didn't give any explanation to us. The internet was cut off, And we even was asked, can we call our home? And they said, no, what you gonna use to call your homes? They had their own SIM cards, and they called them VIP SIM cards. So only they could use those SIM cards to contact anyone they wanted, but we were not able to. It's like they were prepared in advance lest people stage protests, so they would be fully prepared. It's only the date and the hour they did not know, maybe. They dispatched us to one of the squares where the protests are, maybe a kilometer away from where the protesters were, and some were. I noticed some of them were taking their military uniforms off in the cars and wearing plain clothes. And so they said they were told to remove their military uniforms and wear plain clothes because they wanted them to go around the people, identify the leaders of these protests. And so we were told to kill these leaders or injure them and pretend we are helping them, and then while pretending we are helping them rather than having injured them, we'd put them in cars and they would take them away. And we had to first we followed the special forces, but at the moment we got there, the special force military left us, and we were subjected to stones being thrown at us by the protesters. Suddenly we were abandoned. And IRGC and Basij were also firing bullets and throwing tear gas at the people, and they were using the metal cartridges to their eyes, and they were causing injuries. And the tear gas, whenever they threw it, because it was against the wind, so the tear gas would come to us instead because of the direction of the wind. And I remember we couldn't breathe either. And I remember it was very cold, and because of the tear gas as well, to all intents and purposes, it was just very difficult for us to do anything, even breathe. So we were stuck. And there were some who were wearing Colts. They had belts, Colts in their belts, and some wore Kalashnikovs. And we stood behind the IRGC people to be able to breathe a bit and get away from the tear gas. And then there was van that they carry passengers, and I had heard that they use these taxi drivers or van drivers. They were part of the Basij, and so because that way they could extract information from people in the guise of being cab drivers or van drivers. And then they opened some of, I saw some of them setting banks on fire. And some person said, why are you trying to break the lock of the bank and go inside and set it fire? You can just set it on fire from outside. And they replied, no, it's easier to go and inside the bank and set it on fire. Then we make sure the whole thing is on fire. And there were forces. These forces were hurriedly coming in, and they took away the CCTV camera in the bank. They smashed that, and they knew exactly what they were doing. Also, I followed these forces again. They went to a petrol station and set some petrol station on fire. And I asked somebody who was one of them, why are you setting that on fire? And they said, we are setting them on fire because then we can blame it on the protesters. And so when we set petrol stations on fire, the people will not be able to use their cars. And that is also good, because people will not be able to drive and will be we'll have better control over the people. And don't worry, in IRGC we have our own petrol stations, so we don't need these public petrol stations. And we have our VIP SIM cards as well, so we have no problems. In IRGC is going to be okay. We have our, as I said, we have our SIM cards and we have our petrol stations. And even if we declare any kind of if you ask people to the curfew, if there's a curfew, we have everything that we want. We even have our supermarkets. And these were some veteran Basij forces were there, and they would come and provoke the younger ones to go ahead and face the protesters, and the people were throwing stones, and we had nothing to defend ourselves. We were hit by these stones and we were forced to flee, but the IRGC commander arrived and ordered us, saying, I've received from order above that you have to put an end to this in any way possible. And then you can shoot anyone that you want, and you can shoot anyone above the hip as well. And there were also forces that belonged to the seminary, and the seminarians also had Colts. And the Basijis had launchers, and they threw tear gas, and they also had all these cartridges, and it was they had real guns. It wasn't not just pellets. They had pellets, yes, and they had, without having any goals, they were just throwing things. They were just shooting pellets and injuring people in the process, and sometimes very, very seriously. And as I said, yes, they started shooting indiscriminately, and many people were severely injured in the head, in the chest, in the ribs. And many of them, had they maybe received medical treatment, they would have survived. I saw with my own eyes 5 or 6 people dying in my presence because of the amount of blood they had lost. Those who'd been had been shot in maybe near their chest or in the ribs. As I said, had they received immediate medical treatment, they would have survived, but they were taken in Nissan cars. So in Nissan, they put some, imagine in a Nissan, they would put 15, 16 bodies on top of each other and then take them to the battalion and take their clothes off and search them. And imagine, some of them were still injured and very badly injured. And yet that's even the injured in when they took them to detention, they were beaten. And so the beating would continue. And those who were in Ansar Hezbollah and also the veteran Basijis, they were the ones who were subjecting these people to beatings and severe beatings. But even they were in, these Basijis were fearful because they'd seen the number of the protesters and the anger, because we were seeing, and just seeing the way the people were treated, became fearful as well. And some 70% over those who'd come to repress the people had become part of the establishment by force. It wasn't of their own volition to be there and be part of the Basij, to go and beat people up. And they could have been people who'd been threatened to lose their job unless they joined the Basij, or there were people who were told that they would be given certain privileges, so they joined the Basij. So there were all kinds of people who'd become part of the Basij. I don't know how to explain this to you, but many of them were brainwashed. They weren't acting based on any reason, and they were just they were just told it's halal, it's a fatwa if you go and kill anyone who insults the supreme leader. He is a kafir or infidel. So just imagine these people coming to protests. The law enforcement force, they are present in every province. And there is also a special squad within this law enforcement, which is part of the extremist Basij, forced extremists in the Basij. And they are that whoever says anything that is insulting to the supreme leader or anyone in a prominent position, especially the IRGC, they attack them. And they also women's Basij. They call them the sisters Basij. They are there to make sure that people behave, and so they were even the Basij had different parts in it. The Al-Zahra, for instance, or Imam Ali. And they constantly changed the people within these battalions and changing the names of people in battalions. And they would say, oh, we have a new battalion now because we have a new people in it. But many people who are recruited to these battalions have been recruited through intimidation, through bribes, and they give them identities that they can change. So if anyone says so-and-so in a battalion had protested me, they say, oh, so-and-so doesn't exist anymore. That battalion doesn't exist anymore. But they use exactly the same people with having given them different identities, and they call it a different battalion. As I said, they have battalions made up of women, battalions made up of men as well. And those who were detained were all taken to the district command, and as I said, they took their clothes off and they threw cold water on them and vehemently beat them up. And then they also started giving us some VIP SIM cards so that they could contact them at any time to go and encounter the protesters. And then we had to wear these uniforms and took batons and also wear these helmets that we also had to cover our eyes with these helmets had something for covering our eyes in case somebody threw acids on us, so it would protect our faces. we weren't paid. We were there because they'd intimidated us. I wasn't receiving a salary. We just wanted to be able to live without having any intimidation for our families or ourselves. So we were forced into joining this battalion.
In your statement, you refer to different groups called Zainabiyun, Fatimiyun, and Hashd Sha'bi. Can you please explain for the tribunal what are these groups, where they come from, and are they the Iranians or foreigners?
من صدا نمیشنوم.
No, I cannot hear you, Mr. Sabi.
Or is the witness there? Mr. Chairman, it seems that we have lost the witness. The line is not. Can we see whether we can reconnect? Can you let us know whether he can reconnect with the witness?